Okay, so we've been talking about metatarsal stress fractures this morning, and I wanted to talk about the contribution of footwear to metatarsal stress fractures. Now, we've discussed a little bit about the risks of minimalism. Minimalist footwear in itself is not the risk. The risk is how quickly you transition to minimalist footwear. So I think that probably everybody at some level could probably run in a shoe with a much lower drop. But the issue is that obviously, if you've gone out and spent $150 on your brand new minimalist shoes, you want to be out running in them. Now, for most people, they simply won't be able to cope with that quite large change between a shoe that maybe has a 12 millimeter drop to perhaps a 0 millimeter drop. And the metatarsals, and in particular the second metatarsal, are very susceptible to injury and bony stress fracture, because it's kind of rigid within the mortise more proximally between the lateral and the medial cuneiform. So the key is that minimalist footwear, running barefoot, providing you go about it in the right manner, there's nothing inherently wrong with that. The biggest issue we have is that nobody actually knows what the right manner is. So for one person, they may be able to transition in 2 weeks. For someone else, they may not be able to transition for 2 years. So we just don't know. It is a bit of a risky business, as is major change to any training regime. Now, the focus I want to talk about, though, is footy boots. Perhaps my least favourite form of footwear across the spectrum of all footwear. I've got here, this is a kid's football boot. I could probably find you a football boot from 1982 and it would look absolutely identical to this boot from 2014. So the issue is that we've seen a lot of changes in thought processes with running footwear in particular, and also in other sports like tennis, lots of different sports. We haven't seen the science of athletic footwear keep pace with footy boots. Now, it's particularly a problem with some of the bladed footwear. So this is what we call a screw-in boot. So these, you can see we're missing one here actually, but you can see that these sprigs or studs, they screw in and out, and this is a shoe that's basically designed for wet weather football. So they're quite long, they've got a metal tip on them, and they're designed to increase the grip with the interface, and this is what players will normally wear when it's very, very wet. But what we're increasingly seeing is players using a molded sole outsole with very large bladed cleats. So they're not this traditional stud, they're a large blade. And a lot of shoes, we see the blade right underneath the fifth met. Now, you can understand that that can potentially be a problem, and certainly I've seen this with professional footballers where this cleat actually acts like a cleaver, and it particularly is an issue for the fifth metatarsal. So what we see is huge loading on the lateral side. We've got this cleaver-like cleat, produces a huge load through the fifth met, and it can fracture the fifth met. So we get an acute fracture. We're not talking about a stress fracture here, an acute fracture of the fifth metatarsal. That's something to really watch out for. Now look, my advice would be that footy boots are really pretty derelict in their design. I hate them. I've gone on record many times saying that. I think that when we look at professional players, they're spending so much time in football boots, very bad for their feet. What I recommend to players is they should try to institute at least one main training session per week where they don't wear a football boot at all. A good option for them might be to look at something like a trail running shoe, which is a running shoe with a very grippy outsole. We've done a couple of things there. We've mixed up the footwear, changed it up, which we think is a very good thing from an injury prevention perspective. So I don't personally think it's good to wear the same shoes all the time, especially if that shoe happens to be a footy boot. So we've got that mix-up element involved there, which I think is excellent. The other thing, of course, if you're taking your foot out of a football boot, especially with this potential cleaver effect of the molded outsole, and you're putting it into what is essentially a running shoe, you've got better width, you've got probably better support, you've got a bit of elevation, and most importantly, you've got quite a bit of cushioning. Now, in Australian rules, the elite players who follow the ball around are running up to a half marathon and beyond every single week, every single game. So a huge load through their system. When you're doing that in a football boot, it's a bit of a red flag, bit of a problem waiting to happen. So that's something you might like to consider. mix up the footy boots, be cautious of cleated boots. There are a lot of options available in terms of hybrids, various combinations of different outsoles, but I don't think it's a great idea to be spending all of your time in a cleated outsole boot. Okay, that's it for the moment. I'll speak to you soon. See ya.